is the Liberty Tea Party Patriots. This is the longest, you can applaud if you want. There's many of you who are new here tonight, and I want to say thank you, and I want to say welcome, and we hope to see you back at future meetings. We meet the first Thursday of every month except July, and they do treat us right here, so you will enjoy yourself tonight. Liberty Tea Party Patriots is the longest running Tea Party group in the state of Minnesota. This group formed in 2009. At the time it was called the Tea Party Patriots of the Twin Cities. It underwent a name change about 5 or 6 years ago, and we like it a lot. It's one of the original 4,000 plus state level groups all throughout the country affiliated with the Tea Party Patriot National Organization. With co-founder Jenny Beth Martin, the Tea Party Patriot Organization identified this current movement. It's that we had a whole lot of this going on. This is a beat-up old sign that has seen a lot of meetings and a lot of activities over the years, but this is exactly what our founders had warned against. When we become a godless, federally controlled country, we have lost everything. Our freedom, our liberty, our morals, our way of life. We had an out-of-control federal government not so long ago that everybody recognized. It was right around 2007 to 2009. That was when the current Tea Party movement began. It was based on unconstitutional spending and unconstitutional taxation. The TEA in Tea Party stands for taxed enough already. And in order to reclaim our country that our founders envisioned, we can secure public policy in line with the Tea Party Patriot Organization's 3 core principles. They are the limited constitutional government, so we have personal freedom. Free market economics, so we have prosperity and economic freedom and business freedom. And the third is financial responsibility, a debt-free future, not only for us, but for future generations. They are founding principles, so we may all have personal and economic freedom. Everyone is able to pursue the American dream. And it says so right in our Tea Party Patriot brochures. If you haven't ever picked one up, please do so. They are on the welcome table. You should carry this with you, because even if somebody comes up to you like your neighbor who doesn't know anything, you really want to say something to them. This isn't about party, this isn't about anything but who we are and how we envision the American dream for everyone. These are really great talking points, so please take advantage of the brochures that we have. Tea Party Patriots is one of 4 national groups, actually, that put on the September 12th, 2009 rally at our nation's capital. How many of you were there on September 12th, 2009? What did the media back home say about that little?
There was nothing. It didn't exist.
Oh, Glenn Beck said there was maybe 60 to 80,000. CBS said maybe there was 50,000 people there. Well, we knew better, because the park police were telling us between 1 and 3 p.m. that day that 1.8 million people were on the grounds of our nation's capital. The largest number of people at our nation's capital ever for a single event. Ever. Tea Party Patriots is doing it again on September 19th of this year. It is the official 10-year Tea Party anniversary celebration. It is called Stop Socialism and Choose Freedom Rally. It is held once again in Washington, D.C. The details you will be able to find at tpp.org website. They do have Mark Levin as a featured speaker. They will also have Senator Ted Cruz, Senator Mike Lee, Congressman Jim Jordan, Jenny Beth Martin, of course, will be there, and another founder of TPP by the name of Mark Meckler. So please, I don't know if you can still get your tickets and get out there and go, but it sure is worth it when you're out there with all these freedom-loving people. Just fabulous. Cindy's going. Cindy Pugh, you're going, aren't you?
Yes, I am.
Yes, you are. I want you to give us an update on that when you get back. Yeah, that would be great. Take pictures and post them. We'll love it. I want to thank Isabella here, who is the event coordinator for Willie McCoy's. They welcome us every month. They set the tables up. They have the lights lit. They do a fantastic job for us. Our server, Zach, loves us too. All of of the servers have learned so much from our meetings. And you know what? They're younger people, but they're all conservative. It's really been wonderful here. And I do get asked, who's your speaker next month? Seriously. Nancy Powell, you always do such a wonderful job at that entry table. Thank you so much. You know, Don Baumgartner, your security efforts, you're a good guy. You're standing there every month for us. Thank you so much. At this time, we do pass around our little blue donation bucket. Nancy brings that on over. Donations are the only means that keep us going. We do have expenses here at Willie McCoy's. We have had some events we've had to go to. We've been doing a lot of promoting again. Even at the state fair, some people are here. They heard about us from the state fair. Isn't that fantastic? But it's only because we're out there and promoting it. We're a small little group, but we're pretty forceful. We're pretty good at this by now. But we do grow and continue. We get people coming back that have been involved for years and haven't been to a meeting for a while, and then we see new faces popping up too. So thank you so much. Tonight we also have our Patriot friend Marcia Stromgren from Duluth. She's taping tonight. Yep. She stops in too. She's from Duluth. She has a YouTube channel called Just the Facts. So if you get a chance, look her up online too. And she says, you know, like we were talking about this, that we used to have a tea party years ago, and that's when there used to be regular meetings and speakers coming up there, and now it's not going on such a bigger scale. So she comes down here to us, and I just really appreciate that. Thank you very much. I'd like to start tonight by reminding everyone that next Wednesday is the 18th anniversary of September 11th. It's been 18 years. I don't know, does anybody have anything they'd like to say or reminisce about that day, or when it may have started? It brought people together. Glenn Beck talked about this a lot back then, that it brought us all together. It's terrible when a tragedy does that. A lot of lives were lost, and I was working in the airline industry at that time. And I was in security training with an airline security director when his beeper kept going off. There used to be beepers, remember? But the beeper kept going off, and we couldn't figure out what was going on. It was about 10 a.m. in the morning. And we stopped the class of about 50 people. And from that moment on, when we found out what was happening, everything changed, safety and security-wise, in the airline industry. Everything. We went into a 3-day shutdown, and we rewrote every procedure. But it did do something. It did bring a lot of people together. It brought out our patriotism. And groups like this started to swell. And in some unknown way, I think that it still is having an effect on us. And we hope that it never happens again. But I think we should have a moment of silence in honor of all those people that lost their lives, not only that day, but from the suffering that that occurred afterwards. So if we could take just a moment. And with that, I'd like us to all stand and have retired United States Marine John Butler lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Tell us what years you served.
Amen.
Amen, yeah. Tell us what years you served.
Oh, back in the late 50s, early 60s.
Fabulous. Thank you for your service, and thank you to everyone who served.
Well done, young man.
I also want to do another tribute to someone that Cindy Pugh and Carol Wagner and I have known for many, many years. Back in 2009, when this group started up in about March of 2009, there was another group, Tea Party Patriot group, that started in Minnesota called the Rochester Tea Party Patriots. It was started by Cindy Mavis and her husband Al. Cindy became a mentor to many of us. She was just a stalwart. She just worked so hard. She loved this country. She wanted to change things. Her group down there in Rochester became kind of the model for other Tea Party Patriot groups all throughout the state. How to find candidates, how to edify them, train them, and then how to run their campaigns. She herself ran for mayor of Rochester at one time. She didn't win, but the first and only time she ran, she garnered 43% of the vote. That was a good job. Her group also taught so many of us how to work with our state legislators, and that even when you're at odds with them, how you can influence them, guide them, and push legislation in a better direction. Cindy has been battling cancer for 4 years. She went into hospice today.
Oh no.
It's going to be hard for me to get through this, but we're going to miss her. And if any of you do know her, just send her a wish through Facebook, or let Cindy or Carol or I know. Someone like that, who is such a patriot and worked so hard, just deserves so much more than this. I think she's about 54. She's young, and she's going to leave behind a husband, children, and young grandchildren. So we'll keep you updated, but the bonds that form are very deep. So thank you for that. I do want to introduce Cindy Pugh right now. She's our former state representative, and she's a former Southwest Metro Tea Party co-founder. She's here with information on a most important rally coming up at the Capitol for the Child Protection League. She was here last month, too, to talk about it, too, so we're excited to have you back.
Thank you, Mary. I'm just going to take a moment and share with you about a very important event coming up. We have flyers on all of your tables for the Protect Kids Rally, which is going to be at the Capitol on September 22nd. It's a Sunday afternoon, rain or shine, 1:30 to 3:30. It'll be in the Rotunda if the weather isn't great, or on the steps of the Capitol if it's good. And if you haven't read this flyer, the education piece that we have, the Did You Know, front and back, you will just be shocked. And this is about stopping the comprehensive sex education agenda that is being jammed through the legislature. The Minnesota House, of course, Democrat-controlled, passed it with flying colors. And if not for the slim majority in the Senate, Minnesota would be California right now. And so we must stop this. The rally will be the first shot across the bow, and it will build right into and through the legislative session to ensure that this does not pass in Minnesota. I remember having served 3 terms in the Minnesota House. I remember when we were in the complete minority in 2014, and the Democrats had the votes in the House, the Senate, and with the governor, Governor Dayton. And I remember speaking from this book on the House floor that many of you, I'm sure, have heard of. It's called It's Perfectly Normal. What I didn't know was that this was, well, it says right on here, for age appropriate 10 years old. And it is incredibly pornographic and completely inappropriate for 10-year-olds, in my opinion. And in my opinion, the majority of the good people of Minnesota would agree. Unfortunately, we have the new copy of this. It's the 20-year anniversary. But I read from this on the House floor, and you can see that it's all tabbed. And I remember hearing after the fact that the constituency that was viewing us as we were speaking on the House floor, all they saw was a black screen because it was adult content. It was marked adult content.
Wow.
They could hear our voices, but they couldn't see because this is adult content. But it's perfectly normal and fine for 10-year-old fourth graders. So if you're not aware of this, please become aware, please engage, please join us. please share with your neighbors, and I just really appreciate the moment.
Good.
Okay, thanks a lot.
Thanks. All right.
Good, thanks.
I'm going to bring a few more people up, but I want to do a call out, first of all, to Louis Hill with the Right Now Minnesota PAC. There's Louis. Thanks for coming. We have State Senator Mark Horan from Senate District 32. You want to stand up? We've got Michael Olson over there from the Center of the American Experiment. Hi, Michael. And Dennis Fisher is here. He's a Dayton City Council member. Is there anyone else? No. Hi, Sue Erickson. You're ready. We do this every month. I know. You have to tell us how we can get a hold of you to help you with your campaign for House District over there.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
never remember
She can never remember it.
do courthouse41a.com.
Okay. Anyway, raise your hand, and if anybody wants to talk to Sue afterwards, yeah.
Susan courthouse41a.com.
Well, that's a long one. You might want to shorten that one up.
Too late.
I'm teasing you. Is there anyone else? Am I missing anybody? Anyway, thank you again, especially to all the new people that are trying us out tonight. We you'll come back. There's been some talk lately, too, about former U.S. Representative Joe Walsh running to primary Donald Trump. Have you heard that? Do you remember the name? He's only was a one-term congressman. He was considered a Tea Party guy. And you know what? All of us in the Tea Party go, we don't remember this guy in particular. So if you see anything like that in the news, just kind of remember it's the news. This is our ongoing series called Our Fall From Within. And tonight we are addressing intentional plans to change the way we live within our cities. It's about who's involved, what can be done, and what has been done, actually, to stop some of it. We're very fortunate to have two experts in this area, and the first one is Danny Nadeau. How many of you know Danny? I know. Danny, you can start walking over here. I'm going to do a nice little introduction for you. You currently work in Hennepin County. You're our Chief of Staff to Commissioner Jeff Johnson. Prior to joining Jeff, Danny was Program Administrator in the Office of Energy Security at the Minnesota Department of Commerce. He's a previous researcher in the Minnesota House of Representatives and formerly administrator in the last remaining township in Hennepin County. Is that Rogers?
Well, Hassan.
Oh, Hassan.
It's now Rogers.
Ah, I was curious. And for 20 years before that, and I did not know this, but this is why you're so handy around your house, is that you owned and operated a small construction company that you started in high school. Here's a quote from Danny. He says, "Not so long ago, when government and politics were a much smaller part of our lives, it worked for people, promoted self-sufficiency, and protected freedoms. Today's political ideologies prevail, and too many bad ideas become laws. Benevolent bureaucrats want more activity under government control and demand more taxes, larger fees to fuel the colossal progression." Currently, Danny is the Hennepin County Commissioner candidate for Jeff Johnson's seat, and we welcome Danny. You're going to do great here for us.
Do I need this? Do I need the microphone?
Yes.
Yeah. Sorry. Thank you. I'm going to cover a lot of ground tonight. I'm going to try to do it really fast. When cities or regions are dominated by liberal policies, by one ideology, people suffer. Bad ideas are put into place, innovative ideas die, and communities struggle. And it's not because it's just the minority, his voice is not being heard. It's because big government can't see the people anymore that it wants to, that it needs to serve. We lose our ability to build community like we've all done, like everyone's done prior to this, prior to the densification and crowded environments that come with urban areas. We lose that ability because instead of us focusing on mutual trust and respect, when you have tribalism and single party rule, it focuses inwardly, and you no longer have the ability to reach across the aisle and understand where people are coming from. Urban areas across this nation have the highest homelessness rates. They have the highest rates of poverty. They have the highest rates of violent crime. They have the lowest rates of four-year graduation in high school across the country. But yet, those metro areas across the country come together every election cycle, and they vote for the same candidates who have stood up there in their virtuous way and ignore the same people and families, trapping them in poor education systems, unsafe streets, and violent communities. That's urban areas today. So I'm Danny Nadeau, and tonight I may attack liberals a little bit. I may not. You'll also find that I'm going to defend some of these policies because we need to understand where they're coming from. I've worked in Hennepin County for the past 10 years. I've been grateful to be with Jeff Johnson. Prior to that, I was at the Department of Commerce and married. So, am I an expert in Hennepin County? I don't know. I'm an expert in liberal policies that are being pushed in liberal communities. That's where I'm an expert. So, it's not all about politics, but when we talk about what's influencing urban areas, we can't ignore politics. We can't ignore people, and so that's what I'm going to try to. That's what I'm going to try to convey tonight. So if I make some of you mad, I want to apologize in advance because I may say some things that you don't agree with. And by any means, at any time, raise your hand and say I disagree if that's what you want. Earlier this summer, 29-year-old Chris Morissette. He ran in Seattle, Washington. He stabbed 3 people as he was running down the street. Took off all his clothes. He ran across an intersection over to the other side before he was finally arrested in Seattle. The disintegrating social landscape of today, that's not an atypical story in metro areas across the country. We can talk about guns, we can talk about whatever, but that's not atypical, unfortunately. In 2018, in Hennepin County, 37% of all violent crimes in the whole state were committed in Hennepin County. 51% of all robberies, 35% of murders, 35% of aggravated assaults, 26% of all rapes, and 30% of all property crimes occurred in Hennepin County. 90%, more than 90%, occurred in the 7-county metro area. But Seattle, getting back to Chris Morissette, Seattle, just like Hennepin County, it has developed some of the most strong, deep, therapeutic programs for people just like Chris. And unfortunately for Chris, he was born to a mother who was addicted to drugs. And so he wasn't, he ran the gauntlet of public institutions in Seattle, from schools, churches, foster homes, counseling centers, chemical dependency rehabs, mental health clinics, correctional facilities. Chris received the care of doctors, nurses, psychiatrists, psychologists, social workers, case managers, public defenders, career counselors, all with years of county and state training and certifications. Yet all this professional expertise, all these great programs, didn't do one thing to help Chris. Big government programs that are built and defended by one political ideology, that ideology that drives urban areas in this country, are failing miserably, and they fail every time. Sadly, urban areas are growing. According to the Met Council, 7-county metro region, 2.85 million people in 2010. In 2020, it's going to be 3.1 million. In 2030, it's going to be 3.4 million. All in the metro, 7-county metro. I got to figure out how to move this thing. We can't talk about urban areas without talking about densification. It's a lot of times. Well, I'm not going to do that. So what's going on in these blue areas? This is Minnesota. Density makes a number of things possible, but Republicans have lost. We're on the downside of the debate when it comes to urban areas. We've ignored the urban areas. They vote 80%, 90% for Democrats. What does it mean to live in these places and hear from Republican politicians that government needs to get out of the way? What does that mean? What do those people in those districts hear? The real urban challenge that I think for conservatives going forward is going to be to restrain from an ideology that leaves little room for the concept of public good, and that treats all public spending as bad. It's not all bad. Cities, by definition, demand a greater role for government than small towns, and even suburbs. They demand it. We can argue whether or not they should have it, but they do demand it. And I'm going to go into that in a second. And it's our job as Republicans to make sure they don't go too far. That's our job. So, but here's the reality of crowded areas. If you aren't a liberal when you get to the big city, you might be before the year is up, and here's a number of reasons. Traffic, it's a nightmare. And sometimes it's by design. The only public transportation in suburbs and rural areas is actually a school bus. I mean, but when you drive in the city, all you want to do is kill the people in front of you, along with all the family members that are depicted on those little stick men on the back of their windows as you're sitting there waiting. It's not that. I mean, if there was just some mass transit system, that moved more people. Homeless folks exist in higher numbers in the metro than the total population than a lot of rural towns in Minnesota. The last count was 10,000 and growing. 70% of those homeless people are in the 7-county metro area. Cities are far more diverse. 25% of your neighbors in the city, coworkers, friends, are probably immigrants. When I was in high school, everyone looked like me. Nobody moved in. The people that did looked like me. But multiculturalism isn't some failed politically correct agenda in a city. The huge kumbaya world stew has been brewing in cities for decades. It's real. It's easier to see government impact, good or bad, in a city. Self-reliance is a valiant trait when you're in the rural areas. But when you get into the city, the government takes care of your water. It moves your trash. It plows your streets. It cleans your sidewalks. You live above somebody, next to somebody. It's easy when you get into the city to realize that government has a bigger role. And it pales in comparison to the complexity of delivering those services at the rural level. People start to think in the city that taxes are less government theft and more a part of it's my contribution to society. It's easy to buy into that because you see it more closely. Once you start thinking that all government is good, you're in serious danger of becoming a liberal. And my last one, guns in the city. I can't miss this one. If you see a gun in the city, it means something really bad is going to happen. All right? So, when I grew up, we used guns for entertainment. We shot birds, we shot pigeons, we shot sporting clays. All of us went to, gun training, but they were a part of growing up. My dad gave me a pass. During high school, I didn't have to go to school until 10 in the morning. I got to go shoot ducks every day. It was awesome. But guns in the city, something bad's going to happen. And once you get on board with any kind of gun control, you're pretty much a liberal. So,
Dude, kids are dying. Our people are dying of guns all the time.
Yeah.
Our kids are dying. And you guys go on common sense gun control?
Right.
Seriously? Really?
So this is all about, so what's at risk? What I'm trying to get people to understand is the mentality of crowded areas and how we need to try to reach those things and be an influencer. Remember, this whole talk is about what influences urban areas. And in Hennepin County is my area. So remember that maps, after all, they display place, not votes. So in 2010, statistics, these are important. In 2010, race for governor, open seat. Tom Emmer versus Mark Dayton. 160,000 people cast votes for Tom Emmer in Hennepin County in 2010. 238,000 cast votes for Mark Dayton in 2010 on the Democrat side. Bounce ahead 8 years. 8 years. In Hennepin County, Jeff Johnson received 168,000 votes. 8,000 more than Tom Emmer did 8 years earlier. Tim Walz, 422,000 votes. That's what's at risk. When we're not at the table, when we don't govern, it doesn't matter. Green Steps doesn't matter. Met Council doesn't matter. The EPA doesn't matter. Nothing matters. So, do cities make people liberal? People don't make cities liberal. So cities, suburbs, rural places have markedly different social and economic attitudes because they have markedly different social and economic realities. The way they look at taxes and charities, attitudes toward crime, terrorism, receptivity to immigration and trade, regulation of business activities, firearms. You know, always remember that the other side, the liberal side, they're coming from a different place on major issues. It's not because they're evil or malevolent or irrational, but simply they're coming from a different area. They're standing in a different place and they're looking in a different direction. So with that context in place, now I'll actually get to what Mary wanted me to talk about. She wanted me to specifically talk about the organizations that are influencing the urban environment. Now, there's a lot of organizations, and I started here. This is what I started with, and I realized that it's massively complex, and it's incredibly difficult to understand. And honestly, if we can't reach the hearts and minds of people who live in this area, it doesn't matter. All right. So this is just an example. These are the biggest ones in the state. The Environmental Defense Fund, Greater MSP does economic development. It's redundant to a lot of local units of government. Midtown Greenway is an actual creation of the Hennepin County Board to deal with the bikes, and now we own all the bridges over the Midtown Greenway, and that'll cost us millions to repair. 1,000 Friends of Minnesota, and Smart Growth. Brooklyn Bridge is another organization. It's up in the Brooklyn areas. It's focused on youth, but it's a creation of the Hennepin County Board. Will Steger's Climate Foundation, Minneapolis Foundation, and the reason I put these little arrows in here is just to remind me that Minneapolis Foundation, they raise money through membership, through donations. And then they give those dollars to organizations like Minnesota Can't Wait, Minnesota Interfaith Power and Light, and Our Car. All right, they're all connected. Every one of these organizations is connected. They're membership based. Some are government funded and created. Now, raise of hands. Is there anybody here that's a member of any of these organizations? Not one. Shame on you. Shame on you. I'm joking. But we need to be not members of these, but every one of these organizations has an executive director, it has a board, it has steering committees, it has standing committees. I've never once met a Republican on one of these boards. Not one. It's important to remember, I know I mentioned this, every one of them work together, and every one of them at some layer are connected to either the federal, the state, or county government. And these are just a few. There's hundreds. So, and it's not just these organizations that are the regular, the do-gooder activists. And I shouldn't say that. I don't mean that in a derogatory way. People are passionate about those things they care about. If it's recycling, if it's clean energy, we can disagree on what's clean, what's not, but they're passionate about it, and trying to convince them that they shouldn't be is wrong, because it doesn't do any good. But it's not just these organizations. I mean, smart growth, these are EPA. Every one of these is an EPA program from the federal government. Every single one of them. They all provide grants to local units of government, to county government, and if anybody wants information on this stuff, I can give it to you if you'd like. We're just going to kind of keep going though. And it's not just the federal programs through the agencies, it's also, and we've probably heard this before, it's about federal rulemaking. So use HUD, for example. I mean, they came out with their latest, and I'm not going to go into the rule, but it basically, quote, affirmatively furthering fair housing program. I mean, that's the goal. So you talk about social engineering. I mean, there is anything that can be combined in that. And they're collecting large sums of personal data to make sure that we are balanced. That there's, for example, we run into this in Hennepin County all the time. We're obsessed. We're obsessed with the percent of melanin in one's skin in Hennepin County. Regardless of whether or not the family's in crisis, they don't care. They don't care if they're black, yellow, white, indigenous, native. They don't care. We do. We're obsessed with it because 13% of our population is black, therefore 13% of our workforce should be black, therefore 13% of every community should be black, therefore 13%. So it's about that distribution, all right? And it's not that it's bad or good. I would submit that, it's discriminatory, and that's been illegal since 1968. In Hennepin County, this is closer to home. I'd love to talk to you about every one of these programs. They're awesome. Joking. Kind of. No. So these are just the organizations. So Community Works is is a business unit within the county. It focuses a lot on social engineering. It's the organization that starts the planning for LRT lines or BRT lines. And then those corridors surrounding that, and then follows them up with affordable housing. Energy and environment, they're the ones that, they basically don't get any property tax dollars, but they basically raised your garbage taxes this year if you live in Hennepin County. If you were a resident, they went from 9.6 to 16.5 because they needed more money for things like canopy grants for cities who don't have adequate inventories of the canopies that are out there. And remember, it's not about shade or cooling. It's about identifying which communities in the county have less trees, and I assure you, it's North Minneapolis and South Minneapolis that have less trees than Hanover. The Rural Rail Authority, which is a separate taxing district, the Housing Redevelopment Authority, which is another taxing district, AHIF is our Affordable Housing Initiative Fund, TOD, which is Transit Oriented Design, which is hundreds and millions of dollars that go into transit corridors that help people relocate, businesses, both people. Complete Streets, which ultimately increase the size of and investments that we're making in our roads to ensure that every road has the ability to be walked on, ridden with a bike on, a scooter, a car, and in order to do that, we have to reduce the number of lanes, and the list goes on and on. Not the last one, and the Met Council, which is always our best friend. I'm not going to spend a lot of time here, but these are the main programs, and every local unit of government is mandated every 10 years to do their comprehensive plan. Has anyone here been on one of their city's comprehensive planning committees? Dennis? Yep. Anyone else? Yeah, if you're a council member. So this is the area where, I'm going to get to this in just a sec, but these are areas where we need to be involved. We need to be on those committees and basically push back. It's so fun. Jeff appointed appointed, the county does a comprehensive plan update, and Jeff appointed somebody from Greenfield and Independence it was great. It was just awesome. They weren't asked to come back. So livable communities demonstration accounts, these are all funds that the Met Council basically uses to modify people's behavior and motivate cities to do what they want, all with the idea of incentivization. This is just a simple example of how the organizations are working together. When I talk about the complexity, I think my job is supposed to be to show you, to at least try to simplify this. It's hard to simplify. So if you look at this, on the left-hand side, these are all your partners. Every one of these people have to buy in for a particular transit corridor project, and everything on the right are the things that come out of that. I mean, these are massive, massive organizations that have hundreds and thousands of people that are working in them, and millions of dollars that are being focused into these transit corridors that are ultimately not going to other areas of the county. And who can't? And who doesn't love smart cities? So there are other factors. I mean, again, my job is to try to quickly identify for you those things that are influencing our crowded areas. There's others. I mean, development, demand, pressure, desire. There's local units of government that want to grow. Well, when they want to grow, that contributes, and there's nothing wrong with it. That's why there's nothing wrong with it. But that's what contributes. Global enterprise, businesses, targeted public expenditures and spending. And so when local units of government and/or the county decide that we're going to focus on if it's a transit corridor, if it's an active living corridor, or if it's a BRT corridor, I mean, we focus those resources and we change behavior. That's what money does, and that's what big government can do. In-outstate migration, that affects what happens in these areas. Cultural influences, demographics, and of course the biggest thing is governance. If you have more balance in cities, in regions, you don't have that myopic obsession with changing people's behavior and forcing people into a particular way of life. So, was anybody here in this room at the St. Louis Park Replace the Pledge thing? Good. Good. So, this is a perfect example of engagement. But honestly, and this is where you might get mad at me, what comes next? All right? You got the pledge back in St. Louis Park. Thank you. I think it's awesome. Which of you who raised your hands have been back to St. Louis Park? Good. We have to continue to show up. All right? That didn't do anything for St. Louis Park. It embarrassed them a little bit, but some of the most liberal people in the Twin Cities serve on the St. Louis Park City Council, and they're going to be running for House seats, and they're going to be running for Senate seats. All right? So the real influencers are us. The real influencers are the people that show up. And that brings me to my last slide. And so who should be influencing public policy? My job was to basically identify who was, and I've kind of showed you. I tried to put it in context. I tried to show you that if we don't engage, what's going to happen, and we're living it. But if we let all those organizations, continue to influence at the local level, at the county level, we've lost our ability to influence. So I think it's us. Minnesota, I love this place. Minnesota used to lead the nation in innovation. I mean, everything from charter schools to water quality to jobs to, we had the largest number of Fortune 500 companies anywhere. We had wealthy people who basically would step up and fund, fireworks at the Wayzata, 4th of July days. Those days are passing us. You know, we were makers, and we were doers, and we were dreamers. And what happened? What happened? You know, we basically got lethargic. All those qualities that built those great cities, that built this great state, we've handed over to benevolent bureaucrats who basically want to redistribute wealth and redistribute where people live. I mean, that's a little oversimplification, but that's basically what's happening. So, where do we go from here? This is my call to action. All right? Get involved. Join, apply to be on the planning commission in your city. Apply to be on Citizens Advisory Board. Run for office. Get behind a candidate. Get behind an elected official that you support. I mean, actually get engaged. And only do it to the level you're comfortable with, for sure. Write a check to a candidate. Help them in some way. Engage, just engage. The other thing is that I think that we have to do is we have to be kind, and we have to be gracious, and recognize that our cities and our neighborhoods are different. I'm going to use an example because it was a friend of mine. There was a representative in Edina. Edina used to be it was a relatively strong Republican district. Well, it's changed. For whatever reason, we can, whatever it is, it's no longer a Republican district. He's a moderate Republican. But as I traveled across the state for the last few years helping Jeff, I mean, people would ridicule my friend Dario for not being conservative enough. Well, I'm sorry. My representative was Joyce Pepin. I mean, she was conservative. She's up in Rogers. I mean, that's a plus 20 Republican district. She's great. But Joyce Pepin can't get elected in Edina. So we have to be kind, and we have to show grace to those districts and those cities and those candidates who need to run, not to the middle, but run to where they can resonate with people. Because that's what we need. And it doesn't matter if you're in Oak Grove or you're in Bloomington. It's the connection, it's the relationships that are going to help us win elections in the future. So, with all that being said, remember that people in crowded areas, they stand in a different spot than we do, and they look in a different direction. So, our job is to kind of help them turn their head just a little bit. Just a little bit, and in time, I think it'll pay off. So with that, I'll take any questions. Thank you for listening.
I think we'll take one or two questions now. We'll have Mark.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I was, as I looked through the different states in the country, I kind of noticed two states, Tennessee and North Carolina. And what I've noticed is that instead of Nashville being the big city, they also have Memphis and Knoxville, Tennessee.
Oh.
And Chattanooga. And Clarksville is a new town that's developed in Tennessee. Now, and I look in North Carolina and I see about the same situation. As the people in the legislative, people that are running for Senate and so forth, have they looked at these states, what they have done that makes them so different that instead of having one big city, they have several good-sized cities that dominates the urban area?
Well, I mean, I don't know how. I mean, if you look at the Twin Cities Metro, I mean, the city of Bloomington has 100,000 people. Hennepin County has 1.3 million people. It's made up of 45 cities. I come from a city of 11,000, which is Rogers. Bloomington is 110, 120, something like that. Edina, so I don't know that, but you go to St. Cloud. St. Cloud didn't vote for Jeff Johnson. Duluth didn't vote for Jeff Johnson. So what I'm talking about is these urban areas that we've ceded to the Democrats that honestly shouldn't get a pass. They just shouldn't get a pass. I don't care if it's in Knoxville or in Bloomington.
Take one more and then we'll have more questions at the end. Anyone else? Okay, thank you, Danny. You can hang around until after Mark is done?
Absolutely.
Okay.